The black maid shielded the ring bearer during a stage collapse, and the Mafia boss saw her as irreplaceable. Mia Carter had been working at the grand estate of the Romano family for several months, but her role as a maid often went unnoticed. She spent her days cleaning the ornate halls and polishing the silverware in the dining room, blending into the background of the mansion's lavish events. She was quiet, efficient, and always kept her head down, staying out of the way of the powerful figures who walked these halls. But today, things were different. The Romano family was hosting a high-profile wedding, a ceremony that had drawn a crowd of elites from across the city. Mia wasn't supposed to be near the main event. Her job was to work in the background, ensuring everything ran smoothly. But as the ceremony began, something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed through the grand hall, followed by screams and the sound of chaos. The stage, which had been set for the bride and groom to exchange vows, suddenly began to collapse. The guests scrambled in panic, running in all directions to avoid being caught under the wreckage. In the midst of the confusion, Mia saw the ring bearer, a small boy named Ethan, frozen in place, standing directly in the path of the falling structure. Without thinking, Mia leaped into action. She rushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest, and threw herself in front of Ethan. The stage continued to fall, but Mia shielded the boy with her own body, pushing him to the ground and covering him with her own form. As the debris crashed around them, Mia's mind raced, praying that they would both make it out unharmed. When the dust finally settled, Mia slowly lifted herself up, her body aching from the impact, but she was alive. Ethan, too, was unharmed, his wide eyes staring up at her in shock. Mia's protective instincts had kicked in without hesitation, and she had risked her own safety to ensure the boy's well-being. But what happened next was even more surprising. From across the room, Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss who owned the mansion and had been watching the ceremony from a distance, saw the entire scene unfold. He had never paid much attention to Mia before. She was just another one of the staff. But today, something about her actions caught his eye. As he watched her shield the child, he felt a surge of admiration. In the world he lived in, power was everything, and it was rare to see someone so selflessly protect another without any regard for their own safety. Dominic approached Mia, his cold, calculating demeanor replaced by something softer, something that Mia had never seen before. His eyes softened as he looked down at her, and for the first time, she felt as though she had been seen. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. Mia nodded, still in shock from the moment, but grateful that Ethan was safe. Dominic didn't say anything more, but the look he gave her spoke volumes. In that moment, Mia knew that her life had just changed in ways she couldn't yet understand. She wasn't just a maid anymore. To Dominic, she had become irreplaceable. As Mia Carter slowly picked herself up from the debris, she couldn't shake the feeling of the cold, sharp gaze that had been fixed on her. It was like a weight pressing down on her chest, the heavy presence of Dominic Romano, the Mafia boss. She had never interacted with him directly, but his eyes seemed to pierce right through her. She adjusted her uniform, brushing the dust off her clothes, trying to gather herself, and looked down at Ethan, who was still on the ground, staring up at her in shock. His wide eyes filled with gratitude and confusion, and Mia couldn't help but smile softly at him. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Ethan nodded, still not fully processing what had just happened. He was safe, and that was all that mattered. In that moment, Mia felt a surge of relief, but it quickly gave way to an unsettling sense of uncertainty. She had never been in the spotlight before, especially not like this. As the guests slowly began to regain their composure, murmurs of disbelief filled the air. Some were in awe of Mia's quick thinking, while others were still trying to comprehend the chaos they had just witnessed. The collapse of the stage had disrupted the entire event, and the once elegant atmosphere now felt tense and uncertain. But through it all, one figure remained still, his piercing gaze never leaving Mia. Dominic Romano stood at the edge of the room, observing her with a mixture of intrigue and something else, something Mia couldn't quite place. He had seen many things in his life, had witnessed countless displays of power, wealth, and control, but what Mia had done was different. She had acted selflessly, without hesitation, putting herself in harm's way to protect a child she barely knew. It was a rare thing, a quality that Dominic hadn't encountered often in his world. The chaos began to settle, the sound of footsteps filling the space as people started to move about, trying to restore some semblance of order. Mia's heart was still racing from the adrenaline of the moment, but she tried to calm herself. She could feel her palms still slightly trembling, the weight of the experience hanging over her. As she stood to her feet, brushing the dust off her hands, she saw Dominic making his way toward her. His strides were confident, purposeful, as if he had made up his mind about something. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She knew he was the head of the Romano family, a man whose reputation preceded him. He was cold, calculating, and ruthless in business, but there was something about him that drew people in, something magnetic and unsettling. As he approached, his eyes never wavered from hers, and she could feel the intensity of his gaze. He stopped just a few feet away from her, his presence commanding the space around them. For a moment, the world seemed to fall away, and all Mia could hear was the pounding of her own heart. "You saved him," Dominic said, his voice low and steady, but with an edge that made Mia's pulse quicken. "Why?" Mia swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. She had acted instinctively, driven by the need to protect Ethan, but she hadn't expected to be questioned by someone like him. "He was in danger," Mia said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "I couldn't just stand there and do nothing." Dominic studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing her words. Then, to her surprise, he nodded. "I see," he said, his tone softer than she had anticipated. "You acted with courage. Not many people would have done the same." Mia felt a flush of warmth spread through her chest, but she quickly masked it with a professional demeanor. She had never been praised like this before, especially not by someone as powerful as Dominic Romano. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Dominic's gaze softened for a moment, and for the first time, Mia saw something different in his eyes. It wasn't the cold, distant look of a powerful man who ruled with fear. There was a flicker of something deeper, something human. He looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not just the maid who cleaned his mansion, but someone with depth, someone with a sense of morality and strength. "You're not just a maid, Mia," Dominic said quietly, his voice carrying an unexpected warmth. "You're irreplaceable." Mia's breath caught in her throat. Irreplaceable? She had spent her entire life being invisible, working in the background, never expecting anything more than a paycheck at the end of the week. But in that moment, Dominic's words made her feel seen, valued, for the first time in a long time. She looked up at him, unsure of how to respond. She began, but Dominic cut her off. "No need to say anything," he said with a small smile. "You've already shown me more than I ever expected." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Mia standing there, her heart still racing. The room was beginning to return to normal, but Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. She wasn't just a maid anymore. To Dominic, she had become something more, something irreplaceable. As the days went by, Mia couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The way Dominic had looked at her, the way he had spoken to her. It was as if the walls of the mansion had suddenly been torn down, and she was no longer invisible. She had made a difference, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she mattered. But Mia knew that the world she lived in was complicated. Dominic's world, the world of the Romano family, was dangerous, filled with power struggles and rivalries. Yet, somehow, she had found herself caught in the middle of it all. And as much as she tried to ignore it, she knew that her life would never be the same again. As days passed after the incident at the wedding, Mia Carter couldn't shake the memory of Dominic Romano's words. Irreplaceable. The word echoed in her mind, lingering like a melody she couldn't forget. It was something she had never thought she would hear, especially not from someone like him. Dominic had always been a figure of power, a man who commanded respect without a single word. Yet, there she was, just a maid, standing in his presence and receiving words of praise that made her heart race. She wasn't sure what to make of it. She had always kept to herself, hidden in the shadows of the mansion, doing her work without expecting anything in return. But after that moment, something had shifted. Mia had always known she was just one of many employees, invisible to those who lived in the mansion's luxury. But Dominic's acknowledgement had changed the way she saw herself. For the first time, she felt like she mattered. The days that followed were strange for Mia. She continued her duties, but everything felt different. Her interactions with the staff felt more distant, as though they sensed the shift in her. She caught them whispering, casting curious glances in her direction. It wasn't just her imagination. Things had changed. The maid who had always been in the background was now someone different. But she wasn't sure what that meant for her future. She had no desire for power, no wish to climb the social ladder. She just wanted to keep her head down and get by. Yet, Dominic's words kept coming back to her. Irreplaceable. Mia spent most of her days cleaning, but her thoughts often wandered back to the wedding day, to the moment when she had shielded Ethan from the falling stage. She never expected to be praised for something she had done so instinctively. Protecting the child had been a reflex, nothing more. Yet, it had left an impression on Dominic, something that Mia couldn't understand. One afternoon, as Mia was polishing the silverware in the grand dining room, she noticed Dominic approaching her from the hallway. Her heart skipped a beat as she quickly straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. He had walked past her countless times before, but today, his presence felt different. "Mia," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "May I have a word?" Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had never been called by her first name before. It felt strangely personal. "Of course, Mr. Romano," she replied, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Dominic motioned for her to follow him, and Mia hesitated for only a moment before walking beside him. They walked through the halls, past the grand rooms, and into a quieter part of the mansion, where the air felt heavier with silence. Finally, Dominic stopped in front of a door and turned to face her. "I've been thinking about what you did at the wedding," he began, his tone measured but serious. "You acted without hesitation, without concern for yourself. I haven't seen that kind of courage in a long time." Mia looked down, unsure of how to respond. It was just something she did without thinking. Protecting Ethan had been automatic, like a second nature. "I was just doing what anyone would have done," she said quietly. "No," Dominic interrupted, his voice firm. "Not everyone would have done that. Most people would have run in the other direction. But you didn't." Mia swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had never thought of herself as brave, just someone who did what needed to be done. I couldn't leave him there," she murmured. Dominic studied her for a moment, his gaze intense, almost as if he were searching for something deeper. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who only look out for themselves," he said softly, almost to himself. "But you put someone else first. It's rare." Mia looked up at him, her eyes meeting his for the first time without the usual fear or hesitation. "I just wanted to help," she said, her voice stronger now. Dominic's expression softened, and for a brief moment, Mia saw something human behind his cold exterior. He wasn't just the powerful Mafia boss she had always known him to be. In that instant, he seemed real. "You have a rare quality, Mia," he said quietly. "I think you could be more than just a maid. You have potential." Mia blinked, unsure of what he meant. "More than just a maid?" she repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You've earned my respect," Dominic said, his voice steady. "I don't give that lightly. People like you, who put others before themselves, are rare. You're irreplaceable, Mia. Don't forget that." His words hung in the air, and Mia was left speechless. She had never expected anything like this. The powerful man who had ruled over the Romano family with an iron fist was now telling her she was irreplaceable. It felt surreal, like a dream she couldn't wake up from. As Dominic turned to leave, he paused and looked back at her. "Take some time to think about what I've said," he added. "We may have more to discuss in the future." With that, he walked away, leaving Mia standing there, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what to make of this new dynamic between them. She wasn't just a maid anymore, and she wasn't sure where this path would lead. But one thing was certain. Dominic Romano had seen her in a way no one ever had before. And that, in itself, was enough to make her question everything she had known about her place in the world. In the following days, Mia Carter couldn't help but replay Dominic Romano's words in her mind over and over again. Irreplaceable. They had stayed with her long after he had walked away from their conversation. She wasn't sure what to make of them, or what they meant for her future. Everything seemed different now. Her place in the mansion, once so insignificant, felt somehow more. She had never thought of herself as important. She had spent her life in the background, going unnoticed, a mere figure among the countless others who worked in the shadows of the Romano estate. But now, after what had happened at the wedding, after Dominic's praise, she found herself questioning everything she had known about her life and her role here. The other staff members noticed the change too. They watched her with new eyes, some curious, some envious, and others, particularly the longtime employees, seemed to regard her with a mixture of respect and wariness. Mia couldn't quite place it, but she felt their gazes on her, heavy with unspoken thoughts. It wasn't just the staff either. The guests at the mansion's many events, who had once ignored her as she went about her duties, now seemed to look at her differently. There was a strange awareness in the air, a new recognition of her presence, but Mia couldn't understand why. She had done nothing special. She had only acted when the situation called for it. And yet, Dominic's words kept echoing in her mind. Irreplaceable. It wasn't long before Dominic's presence became more frequent in her day-to-day life. He would occasionally pass by her while she worked, his eyes scanning her briefly, and sometimes he would stop to offer a few words of praise. It was always brief, always just enough to leave her with a lingering feeling of confusion. What did he want from her? Did he see her as something more than just a maid? As the days turned into weeks, Mia became increasingly aware of the subtle shift in her position within the Romano household. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was different. Dominic made it clear in his quiet, almost casual way that he expected more from her. One afternoon, as Mia was cleaning the grand library, dusting the rows of bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned around, expecting to see one of the other staff members, but instead, it was Dominic. He stood in the doorway, watching her for a moment before stepping inside. "Mia," he said, his voice as steady and calm as ever. "I need you to do something for me." His tone was not commanding, but there was a weight to his words that made her pause. "Of course, Mr. Romano," she replied, her voice steady, but her heart began to race. "What can I do for you?" Dominic walked further into the room, his gaze never leaving her. "I want you to accompany me to an event tonight," he said, his voice low. "You'll be my guest." Mia blinked, confused. "Your guest?" she repeated. "Yes," he confirmed. "I need you to be there. You'll blend in with the other guests, but I'll need you by my side." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had never been invited to anything like this before. Events in the mansion were for the rich and powerful, the people who belonged in this world, not someone like her. She had spent her whole life serving them, never imagining she would be part of their world. But here was Dominic, asking her to accompany him as his guest. "I'm honored, Mr. Romano," she said, trying to hide the surprise in her voice. "But I don't understand. Why me?" Dominic's gaze softened, and for the first time, Mia saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "Because," he said, his voice quieter now, "I trust you. You've shown me something that few people ever do." Mia's breath caught in her throat. Trust? Why would he trust her? She was just the maid, the invisible figure who cleaned the mansion while the powerful people in this world went about their lives, oblivious to her presence. But something in Dominic's eyes told her that this was different. There was something more at play here, something she couldn't yet understand. "I don't want to be part of this world, Dominic," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I never asked for any of this." Dominic didn't immediately respond. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the only sound the soft rustle of the books around them. Finally, Dominic spoke again, his voice low and steady. "You don't have to ask for it," he said. "It's already yours. The question is whether or not you're ready to accept it." Mia looked at him, unsure of how to respond. What did he mean by that? What was he offering her? She had no answers, only questions. But as Dominic turned to leave, he glanced back at her. "I'll see you tonight, Mia," he said quietly, and then he was gone. Mia stood there, alone in the library, her mind racing. She had always known her place in the world, but now, it seemed as if everything was shifting. She had no idea what Dominic wanted from her, or what was happening between them, but she knew one thing for sure. Her life would never be the same again. Mia Carter stood before the grand entrance of the Romano estate, her heart racing in her chest. The invitation Dominic had extended felt surreal. She had been asked to accompany him to an event as his guest, something she never imagined happening in her wildest dreams. The idea of walking through the mansion's ornate doors, surrounded by the wealth and power of those who usually walked these halls, made her feel like an outsider in a world she didn't belong to. The night was still young, but Mia could already feel the weight of what was about to happen. Her usual role had always been behind the scenes. She was the one who cleaned, who served, who was barely noticed by the high society guests that wandered in and out of the mansion. But tonight, Dominic's actions had changed everything. He had pulled her out of the shadows, offering her a glimpse of a world that was as captivating as it was intimidating. The thought that she might actually belong in that world, even just for one night, made her nervous. She adjusted the simple black dress she had chosen, the one she felt was appropriate, yet understated. She didn't want to stand out, but she knew Dominic would notice her. He always did. Her hands shook slightly as she took one last glance at herself in the mirror. She looked different, though she couldn't quite pinpoint how. Perhaps it was the anticipation of being seen differently by the world, by Dominic, by herself. She had never asked for any of this, never wanted to stand out or be noticed. But now, the attention of a powerful man who ruled over the city's underworld had shifted toward her. And though it terrified her, it also felt strangely empowering. The car ride to the event was quiet. Mia sat in the back of the sleek black vehicle, trying to calm her nerves. The city lights flickered outside the window, casting fleeting shadows across her face as the car moved smoothly through the streets. The night was warm, and the air outside felt alive with possibilities. But Mia couldn't shake the uncertainty swirling in her stomach. She had been invited to a high society event, but she wasn't sure if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. Would she fit in? Would she be out of place? Her thoughts were interrupted as the car pulled up to the venue, a luxurious hotel with grand marble pillars and sparkling chandeliers. People in tuxedos and evening gowns stood outside, waiting to enter, their laughter and chatter echoing in the air. The moment Mia stepped out of the car, she was met with a sea of unfamiliar faces. She was used to being invisible, but now, she felt as though the spotlight had shifted onto her. She followed Dominic inside, feeling a mix of awe and anxiety. As they entered the ballroom, the noise of the crowd seemed to quiet around her, and she couldn't help but notice how different everything seemed from the usual events she had been part of. The lavish decor, the finely dressed people, the air thick with wealth and influence. It was all overwhelming. But it was Dominic who drew her attention, his commanding presence evident even in a room filled with powerful figures. He moved through the crowd like a king among peasants, his gaze sharp, his posture confident. And then, as if sensing her discomfort, he turned to Mia. "Relax," he said quietly, his voice reassuring. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." His words, though simple, calmed her nerves. She didn't know why she believed him, but she did. As they made their way further into the room, Dominic introduced Mia to a few key figures, but it was clear that the attention remained on him. People greeted him with respect, admiration, and even fear. He was a man of influence, a man whose name carried weight, and Mia realized that for the first time, she was standing beside him not as a maid, but as something more. The night passed in a blur of polite conversation and distant glances. Mia felt a sense of isolation among the guests, but at the same time, she couldn't help but notice the way Dominic kept an eye on her. Every now and then, he would look over at her, his gaze lingering for a moment before he returned to his conversations. She wasn't sure what it meant, but it was enough to make her feel seen. As the evening wore on, the music swelled and the crowd grew more relaxed, enjoying the luxury and the extravagance of the event. But even as the atmosphere lightened, Mia remained hyper-aware of her surroundings, of the way people looked at her, the way Dominic's presence seemed to change the entire room. Then, something unexpected happened. A man, dressed in a sharp suit and exuding an air of confidence, approached Dominic and Mia. He was older, with a thin mustache and calculating eyes that quickly assessed the situation. "Dominic," the man said with a smile, extending his hand. "It's been a while." Dominic returned the greeting, but Mia noticed how his demeanor changed. There was a subtle tension in his posture, a slight tightening of his jaw. The man's eyes flickered toward Mia, and for a brief moment, she felt the weight of his gaze on her. "And who is this?" the man asked, his voice smooth, but with an edge. Dominic's response was calm, almost dismissive. "This is Mia," he said simply. "She's with me." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised, but his smile never faltered. "Mia," he repeated as if testing the name. A pleasure. Mia, unsure of what else to say, offered a polite smile. The man's gaze lingered for a moment longer before he turned back to Dominic. Well, I won't keep you. I'm sure you're enjoying the evening. With that, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Mia felt a strange sense of unease. The man's look, the way he had sized her up, it felt as though she had been judged, tested in some way. But Dominic didn't seem to notice. He didn't react to the man's attention or to Mia's discomfort. Instead, he turned to her with a small smile. Don't mind him, he said, his voice reassuring once more. He's just trying to figure you out. Mia didn't know what to make of that, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the night was about to take a turn she hadn't anticipated. As the evening continued, Mia stayed close to Dominic, her thoughts a swirl of confusion and curiosity. What did all of this mean? Why had he brought her here? And why did it feel like her life was about to change forever? She didn't know the answers, but she couldn't deny the pull of something bigger than herself. Something that was drawing her into a world she didn't understand, but one that she couldn't seem to walk away from. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing within her, even as the night continued to unfold around her. She had always been an invisible figure in the mansion, just another face in the background. But now, surrounded by the glittering world of wealth and power, she felt a strange pull, a shift in the very fabric of her life. The evening had been a whirlwind of conversation, music, and dancing, but Mia remained mostly quiet, standing by Dominic's side as he moved through the crowd. She couldn't help but feel out of place, despite Dominic's attempts to make her feel comfortable. Her mind kept racing with questions. Why had he chosen her to come to this event? What did he expect from her? She wasn't sure she was ready to enter this world, a world where power, influence, and danger seemed to lurk around every corner. But she also couldn't ignore the part of her that was drawn to Dominic. There was something about him, something that made her both afraid and fascinated. Dominic was a man of strength, a man who commanded attention without saying a word. His presence alone made people step aside, and Mia couldn't help but feel like she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than herself. As the night wore on, Mia found herself at a small table near the back of the ballroom, sipping on a glass of water. She wasn't quite sure what to do with herself. The elegant guests were all mingling, laughing, and enjoying the evening, while she felt like a quiet observer, unsure of her place. She glanced over at Dominic, who was in the midst of a conversation with a group of businessmen. They all looked up to him, hung on his every word, and Mia couldn't help but wonder how someone like her fit into this world. She wasn't one of them. She had never been one of them. The world of the elite had always seemed distant, untouchable. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of it all, with Dominic Romano by her side. As she sat there lost in her thoughts, she felt a tap on her shoulder. Startled, she turned around to find a woman standing behind her, smiling politely. The woman was dressed in an elegant silver gown, her hair styled perfectly, and her makeup impeccable. "You must be Mia," the woman said, her voice sweet but with an edge of curiosity. Mia hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I'm Mia," she replied, unsure of who the woman was. The woman's smile widened. "I'm Olivia," she said, extending a hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Mia took her hand, confused. "Heard about me?" she asked, glancing over at Dominic, who was still talking with the businessman. Olivia followed her gaze, her eyes narrowing slightly as she observed Dominic for a moment. "Yes," Olivia said, her voice soft. "Dominic speaks highly of you." Mia's heart skipped a beat. "Dominic?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia's smile grew more knowing. "You don't need to act so surprised," she said, leaning in slightly. "Dominic doesn't open up to just anyone. You've caught his attention." Mia felt a rush of heat spread across her face. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, trying to mask her discomfort. Olivia laughed softly, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Don't worry, darling. I'm not here to make you feel uncomfortable. I just wanted to make sure you were settling in." Mia blinked, still trying to make sense of the conversation. "Thank you," she said, her voice uncertain. "I'm fine. Just getting used to everything." Olivia studied her for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You've been chosen, Mia," she said quietly, her words carrying a weight that Mia couldn't quite grasp. "You've been chosen for something important." Mia's breath caught in her throat. Chosen. For what? She was just a maid, wasn't she? A maid who had accidentally become part of a world she didn't understand. Olivia seemed to sense her confusion. Don't worry about it too much, she said with a wink. You'll figure it out soon enough. Just know that Dominic doesn't make decisions lightly. If he sees something in you, there's a reason. Before Mia could respond, Olivia gave her a final smile and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Mia sat there, stunned. What was she supposed to make of that? Chosen. What did Olivia mean? As the evening wore on, Mia found herself drifting between moments of unease and curiosity. She couldn't deny the strange sense of connection she felt to Dominic. But the more she thought about it, the more questions piled up. What did he want from her? Why had he brought her here? The night was winding down, and the guests were beginning to leave. As the crowd thinned, Mia found herself alone at the edge of the ballroom, staring out at the glimmering city lights through the grand windows. She was lost in thought when she felt a hand gently rest on her shoulder. Turning around, she was surprised to find Dominic standing there, looking down at her with a calm expression. You seem distant, he said softly, his voice laced with concern. Mia swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. I'm just trying to understand everything, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic studied her for a long moment, then gave her a small, reassuring smile. It's all right, he said quietly. You'll get used to it. But you have to trust me, Mia. Mia looked up at him, her heart pounding. Trust you, she repeated. Why should I trust you? Dominic's expression softened, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. Because I trust you, he said simply. And that's not something I say lightly. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say or how to respond. But in that moment, standing in the quiet of the ballroom with Dominic, she realized something. Her life had already changed, and whatever was happening between them was only just beginning. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that her life had been set on a different path ever since that night. Every moment, every glance from Dominic, had left her questioning everything she thought she knew. She had always been invisible, existing in the background, unnoticed and unimportant. But now, with every word he spoke, every quiet gesture, it felt as if she was being pulled into something bigger than herself. Something she wasn't sure she was ready for. The next few days passed in a blur. Mia continued her duties at the mansion, cleaning, organizing, and serving, but something had changed. The staff treated her with more respect, and the guests, too, seemed to regard her differently. The whispers, the glances, they were all still there, but now, they felt different. Mia felt like she was being watched, like people were waiting for her to slip up, to prove that she didn't belong. But all she could focus on was Dominic. She couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he had looked at her during the event, the way he had spoken to her, his words heavy with meaning. You'll get used to it, he had said. But you have to trust me. Trust him. Mia wasn't sure what that meant. She had never trusted anyone, not fully. She had learned long ago to keep her distance, to protect herself from the world around her. But Dominic, there was something about him that made her want to believe. That night, as Mia was finishing up her shift, she was walking through the grand hallway of the mansion when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around to find Dominic standing there, his eyes soft and knowing. Mia, he said, his voice low, almost gentle. Can we talk? Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what he wanted from her, but she couldn't say no. She nodded and followed him down the hallway, her mind racing with questions. He led her into a small, quiet room off to the side of the mansion, away from the hustle and bustle of the main areas. The room was simple, with just a few chairs and a large window that overlooked the gardens. Dominic motioned for her to sit. Please, take a seat, he said. Mia sat down, her hands trembling slightly. She had no idea what to expect. I've been thinking, Dominic began, his eyes fixed on hers, about everything that's happened recently. The wedding, how you acted, how you protected Ethan. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. You've done something that most people wouldn't have the courage to do. You've proven that you're not like everyone else. Mia shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She didn't know how to respond. I just did what I had to do, she said quietly. It was instinct. Dominic nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yes, it was. But not everyone acts on instinct, Mia. Most people freeze, they hesitate. But you didn't. And that's why I'm asking you this. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. I need you to stay close to me. There's something about you, something I can't quite put my finger on, but I can't ignore it. Mia felt a jolt in her chest. Stay close to him? What did that mean? Was he offering her something more than just a place at his side? She had no idea, but the way he looked at her made her feel like everything she had known was shifting beneath her feet. I don't understand, she said softly. Why me? Why are you asking me? Dominic's eyes softened, and he leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. Because I trust you, he said simply. And trust is something I don't give easily. His words hit her like a wave, crashing over her. Trust? Dominic Romano, the powerful and untouchable Mafia boss, trusted her? It didn't make sense. She was just the maid. She had always been just the maid. But somehow, Dominic saw something in her that no one else did. I don't know what you want from me, Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. But I can't give you anything you don't already have. Dominic stood up, walking over to the window and staring out at the gardens below. I'm not asking for anything, Mia, he said quietly. But I think you and I both know that things are changing. And I want you to be part of it. Part of something bigger. He turned to face her, his expression serious. This world we're in, it's not kind. It's filled with people who will use you, who will tear you down the moment you let your guard down. But I'm different. I won't use you. I won't hurt you. Mia sat there, frozen. She wanted to believe him, but she couldn't. She had seen too much in her life, had been hurt too many times to let her guard down. But Dominic's words, his presence, they were impossible to ignore. I don't know if I can trust you, she said softly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Dominic's expression softened, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. You don't have to trust me yet, he said, his voice gentle. But I want you to know that you're not alone in this. Not anymore. Mia didn't know what to say. She had never been offered something like this before. Trust, safety, a place where she wasn't invisible. She had always been the outsider, always on the edge of things. But now, standing in front of Dominic, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be something more. I'll stay, she whispered, the words slipping out before she even had a chance to think. I'll stay. Dominic smiled, the warmth in his eyes returning. Good, he said simply. We'll figure it out together. As Mia left the room that night, her heart was full of uncertainty and hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place in this world. A place where she mattered. A place with Dominic. And that, she realized, was just the beginning. Mia walked through the halls of the Romano mansion, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Since that night when Dominic had asked her to stay close, everything had shifted. She had spent her entire life being invisible, doing her job without ever expecting to be seen. But now, things were different. Dominic had given her a place by his side, a place in his world, and it felt like a dream she wasn't sure she was ready to wake up from. As she passed the grand dining room, she caught a glimpse of Dominic through the open door, standing by the window, his back to her. The soft light from the chandelier cast a warm glow on him, and for a moment, Mia just watched. He was everything she had imagined. Powerful, confident, yet there was something in the way he stood there that made him seem vulnerable, almost human. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open slowly. Dominic, she said softly, her voice tentative. He turned, his eyes meeting hers with that familiar intensity. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he looked at her. Mia, he said, his voice warm. I'm glad you came. She smiled nervously, walking into the room and standing a few feet away from him. I wasn't sure what to expect, she admitted. I've never been part of this world before. Dominic studied her for a moment, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite read. This world isn't easy, he said, his voice low. But you've already shown that you're not like the others. You have something most people don't. Mia felt her heart race as his words sank in. She had always felt different, like she didn't quite belong in the world she had been born into. But now, Dominic was telling her that she had something special. It was a feeling she couldn't ignore. I don't know what I have, she said quietly, but I'll try to learn. To fit in. Dominic took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You don't have to fit in, Mia, he said softly. You just have to be yourself. That's enough. His words lingered in the air, and for the first time, Mia believed them. She had spent so many years trying to be invisible, trying to fade into the background, But Dominic was telling her that it was okay to stand out, to be noticed. That night, as the clock struck midnight and the mansion quieted down, Mia found herself sitting in a small sitting room, her mind racing with everything that had happened. She had never imagined a life like this, never dreamed of being part of something so powerful, so intricate. But now, with Dominic's promise to stay by her side, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. He was more than just a mafia boss. He was a man who saw her, really saw her. And for the first time, she felt like she mattered. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet moments and unspoken understanding. Dominic would occasionally ask for her help with small tasks, things that didn't seem important to anyone else but meant everything to her. Each time, he would look at her with that same intensity, as if trying to gauge her reaction, as if seeing her for the first time. One afternoon, as Mia was organizing the books in the study, she heard Dominic's footsteps approaching. She didn't turn to look, but she knew it was him. His presence had a way of filling the room, making everything else fade into the background. "Mia," he said, his voice smooth, but with an edge she couldn't place. "I need to talk to you." She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Of course, Dominic," she said, her voice steady. "What is it?" Dominic walked into the room, his eyes scanning the space before landing on her. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. "I want to offer you something." Mia blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "Offer me something?" she repeated. Dominic nodded, stepping closer. "I know this life isn't easy, and I know you've been through things most people can't even imagine. But you have a place here, Mia. Not just as a maid, not just as someone who works for me." He paused, his eyes locking with hers. "I want you to stay by my side always. I want you to be part of everything, of the decisions I make, the people I trust. You have the power to change things, Mia, more than you know." Mia felt a rush of emotions flood through her, fear, excitement, and uncertainty all at once. "But what about everything else?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The life I've known, the world I come from." Dominic smiled, his eyes softening. "You're not bound to the past, Mia. You're here now, with me. And that's all that matters." His words, though simple, seemed to reach deep inside her, touching something she had buried for so long. Mia had always felt like an outsider, always told herself that she was nothing more than a servant in a world where she didn't belong. But now, Dominic was telling her that she had the power to change that. She had the power to be more. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've never been someone important. I don't know how to be what you're asking me to be." Dominic stepped closer, his presence comforting yet commanding. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Mia. That's all I'm asking. You already have everything you need. Trust yourself, and trust me." His words, simple yet filled with meaning, resonated deep within her. For the first time, Mia felt like she wasn't just a part of the background. She was someone who mattered, someone who had the power to change the world around her. And as she looked into Dominic's eyes, she realized that she wasn't alone anymore. Together, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Mia had never felt more out of place in her life. Yet in a strange way, she also felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The days following Dominic's offer were a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, and decisions she had never expected to make. She had spent her entire life as an invisible figure, a servant who moved through the world unnoticed, but now she was being asked to stand beside a man who commanded attention, power, and respect. It was a world she had never imagined for herself, and yet it was slowly becoming her reality. It had only been a few days since Dominic had told her she had a place in his world, and Mia found herself struggling to come to terms with what that meant. As she walked through the corridors of the mansion, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her new position. The other staff members still treated her with respect, but there was a subtle shift in the air, as if they were all watching her to see how she would handle this new role. Mia wasn't sure what to expect. She had no formal training for this life, no knowledge of the power dynamics at play in Dominic's world. But every time she caught a glimpse of him, his commanding presence, his quiet confidence, she knew that somehow, she had to find a way to fit in. One afternoon, as Mia was dusting the shelves in the study, she felt a familiar presence behind her. She turned to find Dominic standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on her with that intense gaze that made her heart flutter. "Mia," he said softly, his voice warm. I need to talk to you. She nodded, setting down the cloth she had been using to dust the shelves. Of course, she replied, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. Dominic stepped inside the room, his eyes scanning the space before locking onto hers. You've done well, Mia, he said, his voice low and measured. I've seen how you've handled everything, how you've adapted to this life. Mia felt a sense of pride swell in her chest. She hadn't expected to be praised for something she considered so normal, but Dominic's words meant more than she could express. Thank you, she said quietly, her gaze falling to the floor. Dominic moved closer, his footsteps slow and deliberate. I want you to know that you're more than just a part of my household now, he said, his voice gentle but firm. You're someone I trust, someone I rely on. Mia looked up at him, her heart thudding in her chest. I don't know what you expect from me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. But I'll do whatever it takes to make sure I don't disappoint you. Dominic smiled softly, his eyes softening. You don't have to do anything more than you already have, Mia, he said, his voice calm. You've already proven your worth. You've shown me more than anyone else could. Mia swallowed hard, trying to process his words. She had always been just a maid, just another face in the background. But now, Dominic was telling her she was something more. It was overwhelming, but in a way, it was also empowering. I've been thinking about what comes next, Dominic continued, his tone shifting slightly. There's more at stake now than just the family's reputation. There are people who want to test our strength, who want to see us fail. Mia frowned, confusion written across her face. What do you mean? She asked. Dominic stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. There are people who see you as a weakness, he said quietly. They think that because you're here, because you've become a part of this family, they can use you against me. Mia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to make of his words, but the gravity of what he was saying didn't escape her. I won't let them hurt you, Dominic continued, his voice firm. I'll protect you, Mia, no matter what happens. Mia felt a strange warmth flood through her chest. She had never felt protected before, never had anyone who cared enough to shield her from the dangers of the world. But here was Dominic, offering that protection without hesitation. I don't want to be a burden, Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. You're not a burden, Dominic replied immediately, his voice soft but certain. You're irreplaceable. Don't ever forget that. His words resonated deep within her, and for the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she truly mattered. Not just to Dominic, but to herself. She had always believed she was just a small part of the world, insignificant and invisible. But now, with Dominic's trust and his words of assurance, she was beginning to believe that she could be more. As the days passed, Mia found herself becoming more comfortable in her new role. She spent more time with Dominic, helping him with various tasks, learning about the complexities of his world. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when she felt completely out of her depth. But Dominic was patient, teaching her the ins and outs of the family business, showing her how to navigate the delicate relationships that came with being in his inner circle. Mia learned quickly, and with each passing day, she found herself growing more confident. She was no longer just the maid. She was a part of something much bigger, something powerful, and for the first time in her life, she was beginning to understand her place in it. But as much as she had grown, there was still so much she didn't understand. The world Dominic lived in was complicated, filled with layers of intrigue and danger. Mia knew that she was standing at the edge of something huge, but she didn't know what that would mean for her. The only thing she knew for sure was that with Dominic by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Mia sat in the quiet study, the soft hum of the mansion in the background. It had been a few weeks since Dominic had asked her to stay close, and while she had become more comfortable in his world, the weight of her position was starting to settle on her shoulders. She had always been someone who stayed in the background, watching from the sidelines, never expecting to be noticed. But now, everything was different. Dominic had placed her at his side, and the world around her was changing in ways she couldn't have imagined. The more she learned about the inner workings of the Romano family, the more she realized how deep the web of power and influence went. It wasn't just about the wealth or the status. It was about control, about knowing how to move through a world where alliances were constantly shifting, where trust was a rare commodity. Dominic had taught her a lot in the past few weeks, but there were still so many things she didn't understand. She felt like a small part of something much bigger, and while she was grateful for Dominic's trust, there were moments when the uncertainty of it all overwhelmed her. As much as she wanted to trust Dominic completely, a small part of her held back. She had spent her entire life learning to rely only on herself, never allowing anyone close enough to hurt her. But with Dominic, things were different. He was different. He had shown her kindness when no one else had, and he had made her feel like she mattered. Yet, even with that, the world he lived in was one she didn't fully understand. One evening, as Mia was finishing up her duties in the library, she heard Dominic's voice calling her from across the room. She turned to see him standing by the doorway, his posture relaxed but his expression serious. "Mia," he said, his voice carrying an edge of something she couldn't quite place. "Come here, please." Mia walked over to him, her heart beating a little faster than usual. She had learned to pay attention to the subtle shifts in his demeanor, and tonight, something felt different. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady, though she felt a flicker of unease. Dominic motioned for her to sit beside him at the desk. "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving little room for questions. Mia sat down, trying to read his expression. His eyes were darker than usual, his brow furrowed as if he were deep in thought. "What's on your mind?" she asked, hoping to break the tension that had settled between them. Dominic hesitated for a moment before speaking. "There are people who aren't happy with the changes that have been happening," he said, his voice low. "People who see you as a threat." Mia felt her stomach drop. "A threat? But I haven't done anything." Dominic's gaze softened, but there was still an intensity in his eyes. "You don't have to do anything to be a threat," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Your presence here, the way I trust you, it's enough to make some people uneasy. There are those who think they can manipulate the situation, use it against us." Mia's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. She had always known that the world Dominic inhabited was dangerous, but this was the first time she had felt the full weight of it. "What does that mean for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "It means you need to be careful," he said, his voice quiet but urgent. "There will be those who try to use you, to turn you against me. But I'm asking you to trust me, Mia. I'll protect you, but you have to stay strong. You have to trust yourself." Mia swallowed, her throat dry. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "I've always been alone. I don't know how to trust anyone, let alone you." Dominic reached out and placed a hand on hers, his touch firm but gentle. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. "I'm here, and you're stronger than you realize. You've already proven that." Mia looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent her whole life building walls around herself, convincing herself that she didn't need anyone. But now, as Dominic's words sank in, she realized how much she had been craving connection, how much she had longed for someone to see her for who she truly was. "I'll trust you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "But I need you to help me understand all of this. I don't know how to navigate this world, Dominic." Dominic smiled, a small, reassuring smile that made her heart flutter. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "One step at a time." The weight of his words settled over her, and for the first time in a long time, Mia felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone anymore, and with Dominic by her side, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the evening wore on, Mia found herself reflecting on everything that had changed in her life. She had gone from being invisible to being someone who mattered, someone who was part of something bigger. It wasn't easy, and there would be moments of doubt, but Mia knew that she was ready to face whatever came next. With Dominic's trust and support, she could handle anything. She just had to believe in herself. And with that, she felt a new sense of resolve begin to take root within her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who could shape her own future. And that future, for the first time, felt full of possibility. Mia sat in the quiet room, the soft ticking of the clock the only sound breaking the silence. In her mind as she stood up from the chair and walked to the window, staring out at the sprawling estate. The night was calm, the garden stretching out before her, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight. The world outside seemed peaceful, but Mia knew that the tranquility of the mansion was only a facade. There were always forces at work beneath the surface, people who wanted to take everything Dominic had built. And Mia, by association, was now a part of that world. She wasn't sure if she was ready for everything that came with it. Just as she turned away from the window, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned quickly to find Dominic standing in the doorway, his eyes fixed on her with that familiar intensity. His presence was commanding, but there was something softer in the way he looked at her. "Mia," he said, his voice steady. "We need to talk." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what he wanted to say, but she knew it was important. She nodded, walking toward him. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady, though she could feel her pulse quickening. Dominic stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "There are things you need to know," he said quietly, his voice low. "Things about the family, about what's coming." Mia frowned, her stomach tightening. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic sighed, running a hand through his hair. "There are threats, Mia. Not just from rivals, but from people within our own circle. People who want to see me fall. And with that comes danger for you, too." The weight of his words hit her like a physical blow. She had known that Dominic's world wasn't without risks, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel so much more real. "I've been trying to protect you," he continued, his voice softer now, "but I can't keep you in the dark forever. You need to understand the stakes. You need to know that being with me comes with its own set of dangers." Mia swallowed hard, her throat dry. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Dominic stepped forward, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready, Mia," he said quietly, "but you need to trust me. Trust that I'll always do what I can to keep you safe." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, and for a moment, Mia felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was hard to reconcile the man she saw before her with the powerful, intimidating figure the world knew him as. Dominic wasn't just a mafia boss. He was someone who genuinely cared. But that didn't mean the danger wasn't real. It didn't mean that her life wasn't at risk simply by being close to him. "I trust you," she said, her voice steady now. "But I don't know what to do with all of this. I don't know how to fit into this world." Dominic's expression softened, and he took a step back, giving her some space. "You don't have to figure it all out right away," he said. "One step at a time. We'll take it slow, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Mia nodded, her heart racing. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him with everything. But the fear that had been building inside her for years still lingered, a quiet voice in the back of her mind telling her to be careful, to never fully let her guard down. As she looked at Dominic, she realized that for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was starting to live, and that terrified her. But it also made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Dominic gave her a small smile, his eyes softening. "You don't have to thank me, Mia. You're part of this now, and that means more than you know." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long time, Mia felt like she had a place where she mattered. With Dominic's support, she was ready to face whatever came next. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: she wasn't walking it alone. Mia couldn't sleep that night. The weight of Dominic's words, the reality of her new life, pressed heavily on her mind. She had always been a survivor, a woman who moved through the world without anyone noticing her, content with blending into the background. But now, everything was different. She had been thrust into a world of power, wealth, and danger, a world she had never dreamed of being part of. The promise Dominic had made to protect her lingered in her thoughts, but so did the fear. What did it mean to be protected in his world? What did it mean to be by his side? Could she really trust him, or was she simply a pawn in a larger game she didn't understand? The mansion felt different now. The walls that had once felt familiar, comforting even, now seemed suffocating. Every room she entered, every person she passed, felt like another layer of the world she was now part of, a world that had its own rules, its own dangers. But it wasn't just the mansion that felt different. It was herself. Mia no longer saw herself the way she had before. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was someone who mattered, someone who had been given a place in this world, a place next to Dominic Romano. But with that came a responsibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. She had always kept her emotions in check, never allowing herself to feel too much, to care too deeply. It was easier that way. But now, with Dominic's words, with the trust he had placed in her, she couldn't help but feel a shift inside herself. As the days passed, Mia found herself spending more and more time with Dominic, learning about the complexities of his world. She was no longer just an observer. She was becoming a participant, and that terrified her. But there was also something thrilling about it. Every time Dominic spoke to her, every time he trusted her with more responsibility, it made her feel like she was becoming someone she had never imagined she could be. But with every step forward, every new experience, there were also new challenges. There were whispers behind her back, glances exchanged when she entered a room, and she knew it wasn't just the other staff who were watching her. It was the people who had always been part of Dominic's world, the people who didn't trust easily, the ones who would see her as a threat. She had known that being with Dominic would come with risks, but now, more than ever, the reality of those risks hit her. One evening, Dominic called her into his office, a quiet, private space where they often discussed matters of business. The atmosphere in the room felt different tonight, as though something was about to change. Dominic looked at her from across the desk, his eyes serious but not unkind. "Mia," he began, his voice low, "there are things you need to know." She looked up at him, her heart beating faster, uncertain of what was coming. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Dominic leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his dark hair. "There are people close to me who are questioning your place in all of this," he said, his tone grim. "They don't trust you, Mia. Not yet. And that's to be expected. But I need you to understand something." Mia's heart sank. She had known that she would face opposition, but hearing Dominic say it so plainly made it feel so real, so much more dangerous. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. Dominic's gaze softened, his expression becoming more thoughtful. "I need you to keep your eyes open," he said quietly. "There are people who will try to use you, people who will try to turn you against me. I need you to be strong. I need you to trust yourself, Mia. You're not just here to look pretty or serve drinks. You're here because I believe in you." His words, though comforting, only added to the weight she already carried. Mia had always known that the world Dominic lived in was dangerous, but now she realized that danger was no longer something she could avoid. It was part of her life now, and she had to be ready for whatever came her way. "I will be careful," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "But I still don't understand why me. Why have you placed so much trust in me?" Dominic stood up from his desk, walking over to her with slow, deliberate steps. When he reached her, he placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch firm but reassuring. "Because you have something that most people don't have," he said, his voice soft but intense. "You have a strength in you that I can't explain. And I need that strength, Mia. I need you by my side, not just as a maid, but as someone who is part of this. You're more than you think you are." Mia felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest at his words. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen. Not just as someone who cleaned his house or served him drinks, but as someone who mattered, someone who could make a difference. "I'm not sure I can be everything you need me to be," she whispered, her voice shaky. "But I'll try." Dominic smiled at her, a small but genuine smile that made her heart flutter. "That's all I ask," he said quietly. "Just try, and I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Mia nodded, her thoughts racing. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place in it. And with Dominic by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. She didn't know where this path would lead, but she knew that she couldn't walk it alone anymore. And for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Mia had spent the past few days wrapped up in a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Each moment with Dominic seemed to pull her deeper into his world, a world that had once seemed distant and foreign, but was now a part of her own reality. She had started out just trying to survive, trying to keep her head down, but now, she couldn't ignore the fact that her life had changed in ways she hadn't expected. She had gone from being a maid, invisible to the world, to someone who mattered, someone who was seen. But with that came new responsibilities, new fears. Every time Dominic looked at her with those eyes, full of trust and expectation, it weighed on her. Could she live up to it? Could she really become the person he believed she could be? The mansion, once her comfort zone, now felt like a battleground of emotions. She spent her days learning the intricacies of Dominic's world, the subtle power plays, the alliances, the threats, things she had never known before. The people around her seemed to know more than she did, their quiet observations and whispered conversations making her feel like an outsider in a world she was only just starting to understand. Still, she couldn't deny the growing connection she felt with Dominic. There was something about him that made her want to believe in the future, something that made her feel like she could trust him, despite the doubts that lingered in her mind. It wasn't just the kindness he had shown her, it was the way he had placed his trust in her, the way he had seen something in her that no one else had. And she couldn't help but wonder, what was it that made her special? What was it that set her apart from everyone else in his life? One evening, as she sat by the fireplace, reflecting on all that had happened, Dominic entered the room. His footsteps were soft against the marble floor, but the moment he stepped into her space, everything seemed to shift. There was a presence about him, something that filled the room without him having to say a word. He approached her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "Mia," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I need you to understand something." She looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice a little unsteady, betraying the nervousness she felt. Dominic paused in front of her, his eyes scanning her face. "This world we're in, the people we deal with, it's complicated. There's a lot of danger in it, things you won't see coming. And as much as I want to protect you, I can't keep you in a bubble. You have to be prepared." Mia swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. She had always known that the world Dominic lived in was dangerous, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel so much more real. "I know you don't want to be part of all this, Mia. You didn't ask for it. But you're here now. And with that comes responsibility." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Mia felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. "I'm not sure I can handle this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Dominic's gaze softened, and he knelt down in front of her, placing a hand on her knee. "I wouldn't have asked you to stay if I didn't believe you could. You're stronger than you think, Mia. I see that in you every day." She looked up at him, her heart full of emotions. She wasn't sure how to express. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be what you need me to be." Dominic's expression grew more serious, his eyes intense, but filled with something that could only be described as admiration. "You don't have to be anything you're not, Mia," he said. "You're already more than enough. All I need from you is to trust me, to trust yourself. We'll take it one step at a time." Mia nodded, feeling a knot loosen in her chest. His words gave her a sense of peace, but she couldn't shake the nagging doubt in the back of her mind. Could she really handle this? Could she live up to the trust Dominic had placed in her? The next few days were filled with new challenges. Dominic involved her more in the decisions regarding the family's business, letting her in on the conversations, the plans, the alliances they were forming. She was no longer just an observer. She was an active participant, and with that came a level of responsibility she had never imagined. But with each task, each decision, she felt herself growing stronger. She was no longer the scared, invisible woman who had come into this world months ago. She was beginning to find her place, to see the value she brought to the table. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still moments when the weight of her position hit her hard. The whispers, the sideways glances from the other members of the family, made her feel like an outsider again. She knew they were watching her, judging her, waiting to see if she would crack under the pressure. But she refused to let that happen. With Dominic by her side, she had to believe that she could do this. She had to believe that she could be the person he saw in her. One evening, as they stood together in the study, looking over documents that had been sent from various family members, Dominic turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "Mia," he said quietly, "I need to know you're ready for this. I need to know you're ready to stand by me, no matter what happens." Her heart raced as she looked at him. "I am," she said, her voice steady despite the doubts that lingered in her mind. "I'm ready." Dominic smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her feel like she had just taken a leap of faith. "Good," he said softly. "Because together, we can face anything." In that moment, Mia realized something she hadn't fully understood before. She wasn't just standing beside Dominic out of necessity. She was standing beside him because she believed in him, because she believed in them. And with that, she felt a sense of purpose fill her chest, a feeling she had never experienced before. She was ready for whatever came next. Together, they would face it. And for the first time, Mia felt confident that no matter how uncertain the future seemed, she wouldn't have to face it alone.